I found myself muttering. I knew my husband had a tendency to on his own, but I never thought he would pull off something this massive.
What do you mean by that?
My husband laughed carefree on the.
It's just as I said.
My mind went blank at the thought on. My name is Lily. My family was not rich. We lived with my father's grandparents who had a good home, but as my father became older, so my mother had to work to pay for his treatment. We lived paycheck to paycheck, even child, I understood that. My grandfather, however, insisted that he did not want to work anymore, even though he had reached retirement age, and my grandmother, who had never worked, often abused him for being lazy. My mother was desperately trying to do it all by herself. One day, my mother, who never complained, whispered to me while doing the household chores that she didn't want to live with us anymore, and it remains a memory forever. My father was always apologetic, and for my mother and me, his illness worsened, and he passed away before I reached adulthood. Then sometime later, I decided that to live with my mother when I became adult. My mother was a patient person, and when my father left, she spent her days caring for her in-laws and working part-time. She worked hard even though they see to her to take care of them and do. I wanted to take my mother out of that leaky house someday and set her free. I had always had no trouble studying once I had the goal of living alone, mother. I studied hard, went to a good school, and received an offer from a well-known company with a college degree. After that, I was committed to a savings plan by shuttling back and forth between my parents' house and the office. Thanks to this, I was able to put my grandparents in a retirement home and free my mother from nursing care. I approached my mother about moving her current home and finding a new one. She said it was fine because she couldn't afford to live there and told me to look for something else.
I know somehow that you are saving, but it's enough you paid for your grandparents' retirement home. You're still young, so save some money for yourself.
She said to me. I had seen how hard my mother had so long, and I was determined to rep more. But she insisted that she wanted this which she had lived in for so long and knew how to use. While still trying to save money at home, I focused on other things a little more. I have been avoiding going out on girls' nights, out drinking parties with coworkers, which I used to think of as a waste of money. But I began to attend these events while, as a reward for myself, I met my husband at a drinking party held with people from the company. I thought there was one face I did not recognize, but that person was a male employee's classmate from college. He was in a completely different league from me, and I enjoyed listening to him talk about his work. People around me laughed at me when I said I wanted to talk about work, even at a time like this. He and I got along well, and we went from dating to marriage in no time at all. At the time, I was happy with this sailing life. Looking back, I think it would have been better if I had gone through a bit of an ordeal. When my mother heard about my marriage, she was as happy as if it were her own. She told me that I had found a good... My mother jokingly told me,
This is finally a weight off my shoulders.
She said. My husband understood my mother, who raised me with her own hands. He said he could never have done what he did. I was very proud of my mother. When I met his mother, I was nervous. Did he and your mother get along well? What do his parents think about you? He tried to calm me down by telling his parents are not so strict. He told me that they can be rather in the end. My nervousness did not until we met.
I'm home.
He exclaimed from the doorway. His parents' house was a bit old, but was something nostalgic and comfortable. I could vaguely hear what sounded like my mother's voice coming from the living room. Sorry, it took me so long to clean. My first impression of her was that she was a friendly person. She was bright, lively, and easy to talk to.
My future wife is here to greet you.
Hearing the word wife, I felt my heart quicken. I have been here with the intention getting married, but when he calls it makes me swoon all over again. We were soon ushered into the living.
It's nice to meet you. My name is Elle. We've been together for a while now.
My mother-in-law responded with a snappy hello, then turned to him.
She's so cute. You can't help but love her.
My mother-in-law said that, and I smiled shyly, and so did my father.
I can't believe you're getting married.
He said. The conversation was so relaxed from finish that my anxiety was complete. The time between meeting the parents' wedding ceremony went by surprising quickly, partly because we were both. Once we had decided on the dress and arrangements, the wedding was just around the corner. It was a good memory for me that we made the invitations together into the wedding. My mother also looked at my in-laws.
They seem like good people.
She sounded relieved. My in-laws always took care of me when I went to their house. It was about 6 months into our mar that a dark cloud began to hang over peaceful, newlywed life. My husband had been promoted, and his salary had gone up a little, but he was now completely busy. We used to have a strict rotation system for sharing household chores, but sometimes we would come home late at night and the chores wouldn't be completed. It's a busy season right now, so I'll be patient for a while. Besides, now that we are a couple, overcome difficulties together. As I cook dinner, I imagine my husband working frantically at the moment. He's been texting me to go ahead, and I feel bad that I'm the only one who's here while he's working so hard. So I waited until he came home.
I'm home.
By the time I heard his voice, it was past midnight. And I was half asleep, waiting for him to come home.
Oh, welcome back.
You haven't eaten yet?
My husband looked a little surprised as he looked over the side dishes lined up on the table.
I wanted to eat with you, and I think I dozed off before I knew it.
I watched him put his bag down and take a side dish out of the microwave.
I need to talk to you.
I looked back at my husband, who is sewn blankly at the microwave.
What is it?
I thought he was just complaining about work, but then the unexpected words came out of his mouth.
Can you help me with my English?
My body froze involuntarily at the suggestion from my husband. Inside the quiet apartment room, the only sound I heard was the dull hum of the microwave oven.
Why not?
For a moment, I felt as if I was in.
I think I'm going to be even busier so I want you to be a housewife in the family.
But
My husband continued to talk as if suppress my words.
I think if we continue to work together, the burden will fall entirely on you. Besides, my salary is scheduled to the future, so even if you don't work, still support us.
It was true that we could live on my husband's salary alone, which he had earned. But then, my secret dream of building a house for my mother.
but I don't have a hard time living we do right now.
But for some reason, my husband's stubborn insistence that I become a full-time writer. Strictly speaking, I could have housed my mother with our premature savings, but then we would have to worry about our house and future savings. We might even want to have children future. I continue my life of work and housework with these worries on my mind. Then one day, I made a big mistake. My boss raised his eyebrows at me, was not like me. I felt ashamed of my inadequacy and apologized many times. When I got home and was having a latte as usual, I inadvertently told my husband about it. My husband immediately said,
See, I told you to quit your job.
But I'm not sure if it's worth it.
Then, my husband's words stung me.
Are you going to continue to cause your work?
I couldn't think of anything to say. Recently, my work efficiency has been declining, and I have been making more mistakes. I realized that I needed to take a break from work. This is the first time I've made a mistake in my job, but if my desire to keep working here continues, I hope it won't happen again. In the end, I submitted my resignation. My husband urged me to do so. For a while, I was able to concentrate on household chores and get enough sleep so that my physical and mental health improved. I was also able to support my husband more than before. I thought things were going to turn around, but instead I was forced into a tight corner. I regretted many times that I had no job at that time.
You don't have a job. Your husband has one. I can't believe you.
As soon as my mother-in-law found out that I had become a full-time housewife, her attitude changed drastically. It wasn't just my mother-in-law or father-in-law.
You married our son because you just wanted to spend all day lounging around, didn't you?
Their sarcasm grew tougher each time. At first, it was just something we did, visiting their house, but now they come over to our apartment because they're there all day anyway. My in-laws would sit on the couch and ask for another cup of tea. Sometimes they would look in the core of the house and say,
You're a housewife, and you can't even afford to buy a new dress.
and they began to make the usual comments. Since it happened so frequently, I to it, so I would just ignore them. I was feeling much more stressed than what I was working. Even my husband, who I depended on me.
I'm taking care of you, so you should at least do a perfect job of timing yourself.
His demands escalated. He would get angry at me, saying it made no sense that I could not do certain chores. I would have been more comfortable been working. My in-laws now come to our home without calling in advance. I was constantly on edge and felt more stressed by the day. I went to the hospital and was told due to temporary stress, and when my in-laws called several times asking if I was okay, they now begin to suspect I am lying. To top it all off, my husband told.
You need to take better care of Mike.
He didn't seem to care about my health at all, was exhausted. Then, one day, my husband took a paid and invited me for a drive. I had completely forgotten about it until I heard the reason, but it was my birthday. I was tired, but it had been a while since I had been on one. What's more, he had something to share. For the first time in a long time, my heart was fluttering as it had when we were young.
Thank you.
For the first time in a long time, my husband sincerely, but the car was going down a different road than I had expected. I was expecting a restaurant with a nice view, but
Here we are.
20-minute drive to a residential area. In front of me was a newly built house that was about twice as large as the other houses. It looked like a two-family house, and in front of the house stood my parents-in-law. I looked up at my husband. I had no idea what was going on.
This is your present. Aren't you happy?
My husband said while pointing to,
What is the best way to get rid of a cold sore?
I didn't know what to say.
You guys took so long.
My in-laws walked towards us with smiles on their faces. I immediately exclaimed,
This is a two-family home. Where did they get the money to build this?
there was no way we could afford such a purchase with our savings. But my husband was unconcerned.
Your savings? I saw your bank account the other day. I found that you had saved a lot of. Thanks to you, we built a beautiful two-family house.
My in-laws must have known that they had spent my money. They were grinning and looking at me. Without the energy to be outraged, collapsed to my knees at the reality me. I slumped to the asphalt, unable to body. My husband and in-laws stared at me.
I'm glad the surprise was a success. We made a great purchase.
I couldn't believe that my savings had saved to give my mother a house without my permission. It was obvious from the magnificent house that my savings were almost gone. The lease on our apartment had been terminated, and with no job, I had no choice but to stay in the newly built apartment complex. My husband complained to me that I had to do all the housework while his family did nothing. I became completely apathetic and just a machine to take care of my husband's in-laws. They wanted to use me as a conduit and a moneylender. As I washed the dishes, I heard giggling in the living room while watching TV. It was at this point that I became thought, this is not right. Why are these people living such comfortable lives with my money? Why do I have to go through such hardship every day? My doubts soon turned into strong anger. I will get revenge on these 3 people who have wronged me. With this thought, my mind became sea, fog had lifted. I hired a detective to investigate my husband. To begin with, it was strange that from morning till late at night and that salary. Besides, my husband's attitude towards me has cooled since he had been promoted. I began to suspect that there was something sinister behind this, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. My intuition was right. 2 weeks later, the detective showed photos of the scene, of an affair, a woman, and my flirtatious husband. They appeared to meet frequently, and the evidence was easily gathered. I then consulted a lawyer and planted a recorder in our house. The purpose was to record my parent treatment of me as evidence. If I can get evidence, I can prove what they have done, and I can also claim alimony. The house was supposed to be for my friend who had gone through a lot of hardships. And then the 3 of them entered knowing nothing. I will not forgive them. I first played a loud recording of my in-laws yelling at me from their balcony so that all the neighbors could hear it. The neighbors were suspicious at first, but soon realized that it was the family of my mother-in-law. They were all puzzled and was trying to figure out what was going on.
What are you doing?
My mother-in-law's angry voice sounded exactly like the yell in the recording. My mother-in-law noticed this and said, I think you should do something with that. So I started researching and found out about the contest.
No, this isn't what it looks like.
But it was too late. My in-laws rushed to the 2nd floor to see me, and I said to them,
I can't take it anymore. I'm getting divorced.
I declared this to my in-laws. It seemed that my husband immediately noticed the commotion. It was only 7 o'clock at night, but home.
You, what have you done? How dare you humiliate my mother and...
I tried to remain calm.
You're home early. You usually work midnight.
I told him. For a moment, my husband was upset.
I had to beg them to let me go home early because things were tough at home. You're giving the company a hard 10-year fault.
He yelled at me menacingly, but I was no longer afraid of my husband's yelling.
Oh, I thought you were with your lover again.
At those words, all 3 of them froze. My mother-in-law said, I'm not going to be able to come over for dinner tonight.
Are you crazy?
But her expression remained the same. Then my father-in-law, as if in rebuke, banged on the desk and yelled at me.
You grew up poor, so we took you in. It's only natural that you should show your filial piety.
That's right. When you get married, your property belongs to you and your husband. Don't think that you can spend it as you please.
Both my mother-in-law and father-in-law may have been energized by the situation, yelling at me in their usual tone of voice.
Don't you know the law? If I get married and it's money I saved before we got married, it's mine. You are parasites living on my money.
My mother-in-law choked on her words. Parasites. That's what my mother-in-law calls me. This time, I had to remind her who the parasite was. In the presence of my lawyer, I can husband with the divorce papers. At first, my husband said to me,
Is this some kind of threat? I thought you were a parasite.
I can take your words as evidence of one violence.
My lawyer said, and that shut him up.
I'm going to charge you for spending my money without my permission. What the three of you did and said, "You're cheating on me."
The three of them widened their eyes. My husband says that the affair is so I told him.
I didn't want to show this to my parents, but
I laid out the photos in the envelope in front of my husband. The look on my husband's face was truly exhilarating. As a result, my husband and in-laws had to pay me alimony, and the house we bought with my savings became mine. I immediately replaced the locks and the three of them. Immediately after the divorce, they came to my doorstep, but then they stopped when they saw the neighbors who had heard the commotion. The house is now occupied by my moth-me. I'm not getting married for a while, but I'm glad I did this.
You did me a great favor.
My mother seems to have liked the hoe than she expected. She now holds tea parties with her grandchildren every once in a while. A friend of mine asked me if I would consider joining her company that she recently started. It's been a busy but enjoyable day as a full-time employee. It seems I am a workaholic after all. Incidentally, my ex-husband was fired after he was caught cheating on me at work. Apparently, his boss found out that to a hotel while he was on his round. Apparently, his work attitude had been since he was promoted, and there was management to oppose him. The person with whom he was having an affair was his coworker. And she apparently resigned voluntarily once rumors started spreading about her. It was probably a good thing for me was not fired. After all, she had demanded compensation too. If she doesn't pay it, she'll be in. The reason why I know this story is that the company where my ex-husband used to work is now an important business partner. It is still a small company, but I of the fact that they already have reputation. My in-laws live on their pension. They work part-time for low pay and have high rent and living expenses. Their unemployed son also lives with them. Sometimes they would say outrageous things, like I'm not going to be a slave to my job. Was supposed to live in a mansion. We've been cheated. My ex-husband is also having a hard time because he is being forced to build as soon as possible. But the construction workers said it was impossible without them. Working well, and they have been quiet ever since. My ex-husband seems to be having a new girlfriend, but it's just a nice feeling because I know his true nature.
Let's go.
I turn around with a start at the Esky mother's voice. We are going shopping today. I need to forget the bad memories as much as possible and enjoy life. Thank you for watching.